There's a man running a war against the United States right now who has not been seen in public for 2 weeks. Not on video, not on audio. His first message, as the leader of 80 million people, was read by a news anchor on state television, because nobody could find him to say the words himself. His own supporters in Tehran held a rally in his honor and pledged allegiance to a cardboard cutout of his face, because the actual man was nowhere to be found. The Pentagon does not know if he is in a hospital bed. The CIA does not know if he is in a bunker. The Israelis, who have assassinated more Iranian officials in the last year than any other intelligence service on earth, cannot confirm where he is or how badly he is injured. And yet this man, wounded, hidden, running a country from an undisclosed location, has already given the order to keep the Strait of Hormuz closed, threatened to open new fronts in a war that has already sent oil prices past $100 a barrel, and told the United States to remove every military base from the Middle East or face continuous attack. His name is Mojtaba Khamenei. He is Iran's new supreme leader. And today, Conflict Capital is going to tell you everything about him. Who he is, how he got here, what he actually controls, and why he may be more dangerous than the man America thought it killed on February 28th. Stay with us. If you're new here, welcome to Conflict Capital, where we go past the headline and into the actual story. Hit subscribe right now and tap the like button. We go deeper on these stories than anyone else, and what we are about to cover is the most important power shift in the Middle East in a generation. Let us get into it. To understand Mojtaba Khamenei, you have to start not with the man himself, but with the event that made him. On February 28, 2026, the United States and Israel launched Operation Epic Fury, a coordinated air campaign targeting Iran's nuclear infrastructure, its missile batteries, its IRGC command structure, and most significantly, its top leadership. The opening strike was precise, devastating, and for the American and Israeli planners involved, enormously successful by a cold military accounting. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, Iran's supreme leader for 37 years, the man who had guided every major decision the Islamic Republic had made since 1989, was killed at his compound in Tehran. His wife was killed. His daughter was killed. His son-in-law was killed. The family that had held absolute power over one of the most consequential governments in the Middle East for nearly 4 decades was wiped out in a single strike. It was the most significant targeted killing in the history of modern conflict, exceeding even the killing of Qasem Soleimani in 2020 in its immediate strategic impact. But there was one member of the Khamenei family who was reportedly also in the compound that night, and who was not killed. Israeli intelligence officials told Axios that Mojtaba Khamenei, the elder Khamenei's second son, was present at the compound when the strike hit. His legs were injured, his arm was injured. He suffered facial bruising and cuts, but he was alive. And in the weeks that followed, as Iran's political establishment scrambled to fill the vacuum left by his father's death, that survival, and what came from it, would reshape the entire strategic picture of the war. Let us back up and talk about who Mojtaba Khamenei actually is, because if you had asked most Americans this question 3 weeks ago, the honest answer would have been, almost nobody knows. That obscurity was deliberate. It was cultivated. It was, in fact, one of the defining characteristics of a man who spent decades accumulating enormous power in the shadows while making himself almost invisible to the outside world. Born in 1969 in the holy city of Mashhad in northeastern Iran, Mojtaba grew up as his father was transforming from a mid-level revolutionary cleric into one of the most powerful figures in the emerging Islamic Republic. He was just 10 years old when the Iranian Revolution overthrew the Shah in 1979. He grew up watching his father ascend, first to deputy defense minister, then to president, then finally, in 1989, to supreme leader, the highest position in the Iranian state. The lessons he absorbed from that childhood, about power, about how it is accumulated, about the difference between formal titles and actual influence, would shape everything that came after. Mojtaba joined the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps in the late 1980s, serving in the Habib Battalion during the final years of the Iran-Iraq War. That service was brief in terms of years, but it was transformative in terms of relationships. The men he served alongside, other young IRGC fighters and clerics who would go on to become generals, intelligence chiefs, and commanders, formed the core of a network that Mojtaba would maintain and expand for the next 3.5 decades. He was not just the supreme leader's son. He was, as multiple Western intelligence assessments noted, genuinely embedded in the IRGC's security and intelligence apparatus in ways that gave him real operational influence, not just inherited prestige. That distinction matters enormously for understanding what he became. What he became over the next 3 decades was something that has no clean parallel in Western political systems. He was never elected to anything. He never held a formal government title. He never gave public speeches or held press conferences or appeared at official state functions in any regular way. And yet, by every account from intelligence agencies, diplomats, journalists, and former regime insiders, he was one of the most consequential political operators in Iran's history. He did not exercise power through institutions. He exercised it through relationships, through his deep ties to the IRGC leadership, through his ability to influence his father's decisions on key political appointments, through his role in managing the financial and security apparatus that surrounded the Supreme Leader's office. He was the man behind the man, and because he was never in front, he was also never a formal target. The most dramatic example of his behind-the-scenes power came in the 2005 and 2009 presidential elections. Both times, the hardline candidate Mahmoud Ahmadinejad won in ways that shocked Iran's reform movement and baffled outside observers. In 2009, the disputed election triggered the largest anti-government protests Iran had seen since the revolution, the Green Movement, which brought millions into the streets and which was ultimately crushed with a ferocity that shocked even many supporters of the Islamic Republic. Mehdi Karoubi, a reformist candidate from that election, wrote a letter directly to the elder Khamenei naming Mojtaba as the architect of the fraud, the man who had worked with religious leaders and IRGC commanders to ensure the hardline result. The elder Khamenei's response, according to Karoubi's account, was illuminating. He said of his son, "He is his own man, not just my son." Even the Supreme Leader acknowledged that Mojtaba operated with his own political agenda. After 2009, Mojtaba's profile dropped even lower. His religious classes were eventually cancelled. His name faded from domestic political discussion. Outside Iran, the only significant piece of public information about him was the 2019 U.S. Treasury Department sanctions designation, which identified him as someone who had represented the Supreme Leader in an official capacity and worked to advance his father's destabilizing regional ambitions and oppressive domestic objectives. Language that confirmed American intelligence was tracking him closely, but also showed how little was publicly known about the specifics of what he actually did. Then in January 2026, Bloomberg News published the results of a year-long investigation that changed the picture dramatically. And what Bloomberg found was not a humble cleric, living simply in the shadow of his father's religious legacy. What Bloomberg found was a global financial empire of extraordinary scale, built through layers of shell companies, sanctioned intermediaries, and front organizations designed to be as untraceable as possible. The numbers in the Bloomberg investigation are staggering. Mojtaba Khamenei, according to the investigation, controls assets worth somewhere between $138 million and $3 billion. The range reflects different estimates of the full scope of the empire, with some properties and financial instruments harder to value than others. In London, specifically on Billionaires Row, the Bishop's Avenue in Hampstead, he is linked to at least 11 luxury mansions, most of them empty, sitting behind blacked-out gates with private security parked outside in dark SUVs. 2 additional luxury apartments are located on Palace Green in Kensington, a street so close to the Israeli embassy that you can see the embassy from the windows. Mojtaba Khamenei, the man who has pledged to destroy Israel, owns luxury property overlooking the Israeli embassy in London. Think about that for a moment. The mechanism through which this empire was built is a story in itself, because Mojtaba's name does not appear on any of the property documents, not one. The purchases are made through a network of companies registered in the Isle of Man, in St. Kitts and Nevis, in the UAE and in Switzerland, layers of corporate ownership that are specifically designed to obscure the ultimate beneficial owner. The human link between Mojtaba and the assets is a man named Ali Ansari, described by Bloomberg as Mojtaba's financial conduit, a construction magnate who built his empire using state-linked privileges and then expanded it into a global network for moving Iranian money out of the country in defiance of Western sanctions. The UK sanctioned Ansari in October 2025, describing him as a corrupt Iranian banker and businessman who financially supported the IRGC. Ansari, through his lawyers, denies any financial or personal relationship with Mojtaba Khamenei. The properties sit there regardless. The shell companies exist regardless. And the pattern they reveal? Iranian oil revenue being converted into luxury Western real estate through sanctions evading financial channels is as clear as it is infuriating. The Bloomberg investigation landed in January 2026. 6 weeks later, Mojtaba Khamenei was Supreme Leader of Iran. And suddenly, all of that hidden financial architecture, the London mansions, the Dubai connections, the Swiss bank accounts, the shell company networks, became not just a scandal, but a strategic asset and a strategic vulnerability simultaneously. It is a strategic asset because it demonstrates the deep financial penetration Mojtaba and the IRGC have achieved in Western financial systems. Penetration that continues to operate even under maximum sanctions pressure. It is a strategic vulnerability because those assets are now exposed, named, and potentially freezable by Western governments responding to the war. Now let us talk about the succession itself, because how Mojtaba became Supreme Leader is as important as the fact that he did. When the elder Khamenei was killed on February 28th, Iran's constitution required that the Assembly of Experts, the 88-member clerical body charged with selecting and supervising the Supreme Leader, convened to choose a replacement. What followed over the next 8 days was not the smooth constitutional process the Islamic Republic's rulebook describes. It was a power struggle. Iran International, the London-based Persian-language news outlet with extensive sources inside the Iranian establishment, reported that IRGC commanders made repeated contacts and psychological and political pressure on Assembly of Experts members to vote for Mojtaba. Beginning immediately on March 3rd, the first day a quorum could be assembled. Several assembly members later told sources that they felt coerced. Ali Larijani, Tehran's most influential political power broker and a man with significant IRGC connections himself, was reportedly opposed to the appointment. There were serious questions about Mojtaba's qualifications. He is a Hojjatul Islam, a mid-level cleric, not an Ayatollah, the higher religious rank normally associated with the supreme leadership position. The elder Khamenei himself, in a 2024 conversation documented by the New York Times, reportedly told the Assembly of Experts that his son should be excluded from consideration for the succession. Mojtaba had no executive experience. He had never run a government ministry, never commanded a military unit at a senior level, never managed any publicly accountable institution. His entire career had been conducted in the shadows. And yet, on March 9th, the Assembly announced his appointment. The IRGC, it was widely reported, had decided it wanted a supreme leader it could manage. A more pliant version of his father, as one source put it to Reuters, who would back their hardline policies. The clerical establishment may have chosen Mojtaba, but the IRGC made it happen. This raises a question that cuts to the heart of the current strategic situation. Is Mojtaba Khamenei actually in control? Or is he a figurehead, a name on a telegram channel, a face on a cardboard cutout at rallies, while the real decisions are being made by IRGC generals and political power brokers operating behind him? The evidence is genuinely ambiguous, and it is worth being honest about that ambiguity. On one hand, his first public statement, delivered not by him, but read by a television anchor with no accompanying video or audio, doubled down on every core position. Keep the strait closed, continue attacking U.S. bases, demand reparations before any ceasefire. These are not the words of a man under pressure to make concessions. They are maximalist demands from a regime that believes it still has leverage. On the other hand, Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian, technically below the supreme leader in the constitutional hierarchy, told reporters the same week that Iran would consider ending the war if certain conditions were met, a statement directly contradicted by Mojtaba's message. Two voices, two different positions, from within the same government on the single most important question the country faces. That is not a picture of a unified command. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said publicly that Mojtaba is wounded and likely disfigured. Iranian state television referred to him using the term Janbaz Jang, a designation normally reserved for military personnel who have been wounded in action. Iran's ambassador to Cyprus confirmed in a Guardian interview that Mojtaba was injured in his legs, arms, and hands and expressed doubt that he would be comfortable giving a speech. The fact that his first message to the nation he now leads was delivered by a news anchor reading from a printed statement, with no video, no audio, no proof of life beyond a handwriting sample, has deepened speculation about just how serious those injuries are. Some opposition researchers have gone further, suggesting he may be incapacitated. Others point out that even a wounded Mojtaba is dangerous precisely because his incapacitation means the IRGC is effectively running the country without any civilian constraint at all. What does all of this mean for the war and for American strategy? Several things, and they are all uncomfortable. First, the elimination of the elder Khamenei did not produce the strategic result that American and Israeli planners appear to have hoped for. The assumption, explicit in Trump's public comments about Iran following the path of Venezuela, was that killing the supreme leader would trigger either a leadership collapse or a negotiated capitulation. Instead, within 8 days, Iran had a new supreme leader who is more hardline than the last one, who has explicitly promised revenge, and who has used his first public act to double down on every position the war was supposed to change. The decapitation strategy, at least so far, has not decapitated the regime, it has radicalized it. Second, and this is the part that the American foreign policy establishment is struggling to process in real time, the IRGC, not the clerical establishment, is now the dominant power in Iran. The elder Khamenei, for all his faults, served as a check on the most extreme IRGC factions. He had his own political agenda, his own religious authority, his own relationships with the clerical establishment in calm that gave him genuine independence from the military. Mojtaba has none of those independent sources of authority. He was put in place by the IRGC. His connections are IRGC connections. His political identity is IRGC identity. A supreme leader, who is a creation of the Revolutionary Guard, rather than a constraint on it, is a qualitatively different kind of adversary, one whose decision-making calculus is shaped entirely by military logic, rather than by the kind of political and economic considerations that sometimes created openings for diplomacy with his father. Third, the mystery of his whereabouts is not just a curiosity, it has real operational implications. When no one knows where the supreme leader is, when even the Iranian ambassador to Cyprus is speculating about whether his boss is in a hospital, the question of who is actually authorizing military decisions becomes genuinely urgent. The mines going into the Strait of Hormuz, the missile strikes on Gulf shipping, the drone attacks on American bases, someone is approving these operations in real time. If it is not Mojtaba himself, then it is the IRGC acting on prior doctrine, without meaningful political oversight. Either scenario is alarming for different reasons. An incapacitated supreme leader with an autonomous IRGC is one of the most dangerous configurations imaginable for a country with Iran's capabilities, because there is no one with the authority to say stop. Here is what we know with certainty as of today. Mojtaba Khamenei is alive. He is wounded. He has not been seen publicly since February 28th. His first communication to the Iranian people and the world was a written statement read by someone else on television, accompanied by a handwriting sample to prove he authored it. A piece of theatrics that tells you everything about both the regime's need to project continuity and its inability to actually produce the man. The war goes on. The strait stays closed. The missiles keep flying. And somewhere in Iran, in a hospital, in a bunker, in a secure location with limited communications, as American intelligence describes it, the man who now holds the fate of 80 million people and the stability of the global oil market in his hands is either directing the war or being kept alive, while others direct it in his name. Donald Trump called him a lightweight and expressed disappointment that he was selected. Trump said he did not believe Mojtaba can live in peace. That last phrase is worth sitting with, because it has two readings. One is that Trump means Mojtaba is too hardline to ever accept a peaceful settlement. The other reading, and in a war where American and Israeli intelligence services have already killed the previous supreme leader, multiple IRGC generals, and thousands of Iranian military personnel, is something more literal. Whether that second reading is intentional or not, Mojtaba Khamenei almost certainly heard it both ways. And that may be precisely why no one can find him. The deeper lesson of Mojtaba Khamenei is one that American foreign policy has been learning and failing to learn for the better part of a century. That decapitation strategies against ideologically committed adversaries frequently fail to achieve their intended strategic result. They kill the person, they do not kill the institution, they do not kill the idea. And in this case, they may have produced something more dangerous than what they destroyed. A supreme leader with no executive experience, deep IRGC loyalty, personal rage from the murder of his family, and no political incentive whatsoever to negotiate. A man who cannot be found, and who for now cannot be killed. This is conflict capital. We will keep following this story as it develops. Before you go, drop a comment below. Do you think Mojtaba is actually in control, or is the IRGC running this war? That is the question that determines everything about what comes next. If this video gave you a clearer picture of who is on the other side of this war, share it. Pass it to someone who is following these events and wants to understand them at this level. Hit the like button, share this video, and we will see you in the next one. Stay sharp, stay curious. This is Conflict Capital.